I'm afraid to make a video on creative fear. I think that's irony. Attempting to create something new is always a process. There's the element of starting out in something new, trying to perfect the medium you're already comfortable with, and then trying something so far outside your comfort zone it is just downright concerning to everyone. Regardless of what the case may be, fear is the underlying motivator and inhibitor when it comes to creative works. Given how pivotal it is in the creative process, it's important to understand how to utilize it properly. Getting started is easily the hardest hump to clear when trying to create something. You question how you should even begin, or worst of all, you don't even know if you should start. But what you'll find is it doesn't take a whole lot to get started. You're probably already engrossed in watching creators that you know, and you've learned a lot of their techniques and hope to emulate some of those things. This is what puts you at the pit of despair in the Dunning-Kruger effect. It's that dip where you're at the most vulnerable, where you know of all your shortcomings in a given field. But this is a good thing. Being aware of your shortcomings in a given field allows you to work on those and build the experience needed. And with more experience, you're going to have more confidence in what you do. Experience is foundational in mastering any sort of medium. But to get started, you have to make that plunge. If you've spent a lot of time on making something, you'd likely want it to be appreciated by others. But what if it's not as good as you think it is in the moment? You sit back and you kind of appreciate what you've made, and then you slowly come to the realization that you've made this beautifully polished dumpster fire of work. Of course, you're going to start to doubt yourself. I mean, you've spent all this time and effort on something that's going to likely just result in public embarrassment. The fact of the matter is that most people aren't going to see what you've made through the same lens that you are. Worst case scenario, you've made some content that people can just absorb and move on with their lives. They're probably going to enjoy it anyway. Even if things aren't received well, you've still got a chance to learn from failure here. Fail hard and fail often. That's like one of the teachings I've always been hearing for any sort of craft. But you don't play the game to fail. One of the ways to approach this is to dilute the failure, wherein you go in and experiment a bit, tweak things, try something new, work with what you have already, and then realize how terrible of an idea it is and scrap it entirely and move forward. In that moment, you've learned from a failure. Now, let's say you poured your heart out into making something, and it wasn't received nearly as well as you were hoping. It's okay. It happens. Take the time, do what you need to do, cry in the shower if you need. But now you've got work to do. Break down what went wrong. Consult your friends and see what they liked and disliked about what you made. Criticism is one of the utmost important things when it comes to making something, because you're only going to be seeing it through the lens that you have. Everything else that you pour out to someone else, they'll find the flaws in it and they'll see what they like and dislike. You're not going to be able to see those things. If you find online communities that share in the craft that you're working on, be sure to post it there and see what other people think and what kind of advice they're going to give you on that. Never take offense to criticism. That's the biggest thing. It's easier said than done, I know, but being able to step back from what you've made and let other people give you the advice that you need and point out the flaws that you may have missed, that is extremely important in moving forward and making changes into your craft. So you've gotten the hang of things and you're happy with what you're making. It's good enough, and that's good enough for you. But should it be? You're starting to see what your friends and other creators are making online, and you're starting to get that feeling that maybe you should make some drastic changes to reach the level that they're at. Complacency is a real detriment to creative growth. There's really only so much that your little bubble of comfort can really allow for your expansion. Homeostasis. The tendency toward a relatively stable equilibrium between interdependent elements, especially as maintained by physiological processes. In this context, that's the subconscious desire to remain consistent with what you've done in the past. Remain on brand, if you will. If you have work that was largely successful in the past, you're likely going to keep going with that in order to tickle the fancy of your audience. But change doesn't really need to be drastic in terms of changing what you produce. I mean, you can combine the old with the new, start with small little things, experiment a bit, and see how it works with your existing work. You're going to find that it's easier than you might actually think, and it's really going to impact how you progress forward as a creator. Now, something that comes up when you become a consistent producer of content is not being able to deliver on a consistent basis. You might try and lock yourself down to making a certain number of songs, paintings, videos, tree carvings in a very limited amount of time. There's a lot of misconceptions when it comes to delivering, and depending on your mental chemistry, you might have some severe misconceptions about what people think of you and expect. First and foremost, your content is going to suffer severely if you deadline your work. Now, if your end products are actually under deadlines put in place by your employer, Godspeed. But for most people making work for creative attention or recognition, you're going to want to spend more time on it because it's really going to be reflected in the end product. The other misconception lies in your perception of other people's expectations. Sure, people might pressure you to make more work, or they expect a lot in this short time frame because they like what you make, but your work is really going to suffer if you give in to those demands. There's never any shame in taking the time to step back from what you're creating and really analyze what you're trying to create here, especially if you're creatively drained. That drain is one of the hardest things to push yourself out of, but it usually comes with time. A good content is always worth the wait. Fear is a natural response to any new situation, but how you handle it completely affects what you produce. Utilizing fear as a motivator to push you into the unknown can really change what you make, but if you let it inhibit you, there's a lot of those ideas you might have had that'll never reach fruition. Now with that said, go out and make something.